Hello, everyone. Today I am going to walk everyone through the easiest way I know to create a character for the Fall of the Topaz Dynasty campaign. You're more than welcome to deviate from this in any way you wish, but this is probably the most straightforward. I know I've had a lot of people saying, hey, the character sheet is 14 pages. It's kind of crazy. There's 1,000 pages in the player's guide. Do not worry. It seems daunting, but hopefully by the end of this, it will be a little bit more sensible. And the way I've tried to lay this out, both the sheet and the player's guide, is essentially as you go through it, you will fill everything out in kind of the same order. So I've got my bookmarks here. I've got the player's guide that is currently up to date right here, and the character folio on the left side with my bookmarks here. And if you notice, the bookmarks are laid out in parts. And the reason I did that in part was because, bookmarks are bookmarks, but also if you follow along with the parts, it should reduce the amount you have to go back and forth within your character creation process. But what we're going to do, we are going to create not the most simple character that I possibly can. I do want to show you guys a little bit of complexity and show you guys that even, a spellcaster or something a little bit more complicated sounding isn't really all that hard to do. So I've made the PDF. It's printer friendly. It's all black and white, but I've also made it form fillable, and I have fonts embedded to an extent. So if you want the really nice fonts that you see in this video, check our resources tab in the Discord. There should be a deluxe version of the sheet, and you can actually install those fonts on any computer. And when you open up the PDF and you start typing, it will use those fonts. So without further ado, let's get started. What I'm going to do first, obviously, I'm going to put my name in here because I'm vain and I like doing that and it looks really cool. So I'm going to start with that. Obviously, easiest thing that you can possibly do. If you are playing online and you're sharing this sheet and you don't want to use your name, that is obviously fine. You can put anything or leave it blank. It doesn't matter either way. Next, you've got this nice little waterfall page. And here is the sheet in general. I'm going to do a quick overview of the sheet just so I can show you guys a little bit of that, and then we'll jump into character creation. So your first major page is the personal journal. This is your character's name and kind of an overview of your selections as far as what class and character options you chose. It's also where your level is, your level of prestige, your destiny, your appearance, all your basic information. And the idea behind this, I like having all of this on a separate page right at the front because it gives you a chance to have basically a quick thing that if you wanted to, you could give people this and it would explain your character to people in a really succinct way, which I don't think a lot of D&D sheets can do. Up next, we have the backstory page. I left a lot of blank here, so that way anything that is relating to your backstory, either story-wise or ability-wise, it gives you a chance to type it out here instead of trying to bunch it all up onto this side of the page. Beyond that, we have the first kind of what everyone views as the main pillar of D&D, the combat. I separated most of the skill-based things and the kind of out of combat abilities off of this page to kind of focus more on what we have here. So this is where all of your pertinent information will be for what you need when I say, hey, it's time to fight. On the next page, we have kind of an extended combat ability section, which we'll get to in a bit, as well as a maneuver section for people who have combat maneuvers as relating to their class. We also have a spell casting page as the next thing. And like I said, all of these are designed to where at most you're only flipping through 1 or 2 at the most pages, depending on your character. And that way, in the middle of combat, you're not having to flip through 14 pages of information. After that, we have the exploration side, which also doubles as our social challenge page. It has all of your skills ready, so that way you can at a glance see what you are capable of and what you can do and not do. It also gives you areas to monitor your supply if your character needs supply to survive, which most of you will, as well as your fatigue and strife, which is important to keep track of when you're exploring. We also have a little bit more room, just like with combat, for kind of expanding on your exploration abilities. Finally, we have your items and equipment and, currency page. This is where you could put down any items that you have in your inventory, your bulky items that you're currently carrying, and what you have equipped. And then your notes, which is just a little bit of note carrying, session notes, stuff like that. And that's basically it. Like I said, it seems daunting, but hopefully by the time we get through with this character creation video, it should all make a little bit more sense. It'll be a little bit less daunting, and hopefully some of you that are on the fence about creating a character will feel a little bit more comfortable. As always, feel free to send me a private message on Discord or Facebook or any other medium of communication. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, just please let me know. So what we're going to start with today is fairly simple. We're going to start from the top, work our way to a full character. And to get started, I like to start with heritage, which is who you are, basically your parentage, your ancestry. And it's my favorite part about this system is that we separate your ancestry, what you were born as, from your culture as what you were raised in. In D&D 5th edition, you are born an elf, so obviously all of your abilities, all of your attributes are related specifically to you as an elf. And that is fair. It definitely makes things easier. But it kind of leaves out, what if you were an elf that lived in a dwarven stronghold? You probably don't have the same abilities because your upbringing is different. Your outlook may be different. And I think that's a really good change. So what we're going to do, I'm thinking, let's make an interesting character. So let's go ahead and make, I think we'll do an orc. I think orcs are really cool. They get a bad rap in a lot of media because, they're the quintessential quote unquote evil race. And I think that's a real shame. So I am going to do an orc. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to my heritage. I'm going to put orc there. And orcs have these nice little traits in the book, and we can start with age. Age isn't generally going to pop up, but most adventurers are going to be adventuring, on average between, early adulthood to middle adulthood. There are some elderly adventurers and there are some younger adventurers, but generally speaking, that like peak performance age is when people adventure. I'm going to say this guy is 27. He's 27 years old. They reach adulthood. Orcs reach adulthood around age 14. So he's been around the block a time or two. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and say that he is 7'2". Kind of roughly in the middle of the size chart as far as I'm concerned. Speed is 30 feet, so I'm going to move over to here real quick and just type in 30 for my speed over here, and then head right on back. We have dark vision to 60 feet, so I'm going to put that under probably, I like to put that under exploration abilities or proficiencies. So I'm just going to put dark vision 60 feet. And you'll notice a lot of times I don't necessarily know where I'm going to put that. And the reason being, I've tried to lay this out in a way where it's free form. You're not required to put anything in a specific spot on this character sheet outside of a couple, common sense places, because some people reference things differently. For me, I like putting my vision under proficiencies, but other people might want to put them under backstory or anything like that. I am a heavy lifter, so when determining my carrying capacity and the weight I can push, drag, or lift, I am considered to be large. I think I'm going to use that when I explore. So I'm going to put that under here. So I'm going to put heavy lifter. And if you notice, most of what I'm doing is just adding what I see under what I choose to my character sheet somewhere. And the reason being, that way I don't have to reference the book. Now, sometimes if it's a particularly obscure thing that I don't think I'm going to use much, say I don't expect to be using my heavy lifter capabilities all that often, I can just put page 36 and then a little bit of a blurb. So, size large when pushing, something like that. But I've kind of formatted this to where as you write stuff, it gets smaller type. So, barring getting too small to read, you should be able to put a decent chunk in each of these things. So I'm just going to put when determining carrying capacity, my size is considered to be large, which basically means I can carry more things, I can push things. It's a nice little ability. I'm a little bit stronger. Okay, so on top of that, mighty attacks. When I critically hit with a melee weapon attack, roll one of the weapon's damage dice again and add the result to the attack's damage. So that's, again, another really cool feature. So this orcs, they are stronger. They're more muscular. They're like the people that go to the gym every day. It's a really cool idea, and I'm liking him already. So mighty attacks, I think I'll put in my combat abilities. So when crit, add one additional weapon damage die. Let's see. And if you notice, I'm kind of giving myself, I'm truncating some of this information. You can be as precise as you want to be when you type. The only thing I ask, if you feel as though it's going to be imperative that you can read it word for word, please feel free to write it down. I've also tried to put this in such a way that you can print 1 to 2 pages per part of this, and that should give you enough information um, alongside your character sheet if you did need to do a quick reference. So, what I kind of like to do is keep things short and then print or have a stitched together bookmarked PDF with all of my pertinent information for my heritage and so on next to my character sheet. Now, beyond your normal traits, you get a heritage gift, and the gift for your heritage is basically just something that gives you a little bit more uniqueness from your heritage. So you're an orc, but maybe you are an orc with ancestral blessing. So you would have resistance to radiant damage, and I know a few, holy cantrips spells, which is pretty cool. Or you're a magic adept, so you have a lot of capability for wizard spells, even if you're not a wizard. That's really interesting. I like that. I think I actually really kind of like this ancestral blessing. I think that's a really cool thing. So this guy or girl, I haven't decided yet, is resistant to radiant damage. They were blessed in their ancestral religion and have more resistance and more receptiveness to religious rites. So I'm just going to put that there. And I'm just going to put resistance to radiant damage. And sorry, I had to cough, so I had to pause. And let's see, touch of divinity. So I know resistance and can cast shield once per long rest. So I know the resistance cantrip and can cast shield once per long rest. And there we go. My prestige is 0 right now. I am unknown. You will all start, relatively unknown as far as adventuring goes. You may have, been heard of before related to your background. You may be somewhat famous due to your background, but in this instance, prestige is largely referring to your prestige as an adventurer. Our level is 1, and our current experience that we are trying to reach is 300. Once we reach 300 experience, we reach level 2. So simple enough. So at this point, most of what we have here, I'm just going to go ahead and fill out some stuff with my weight, my eye color, my skin tone, and my hair color. And, sometimes that's not really important. I like to put that in. I like to start thinking of an appearance just because it lets me connect to my character. I do, again, this, I'm going to work within the confines. I think I'm going to make, her name is going to be Magdra Steel Arm. And Magdra Steel Arm is a fairly muscular orc, and she's going to do a pretty good job with it. So at this point, we've kind of done everything we need with our heritage. Now we're going to move on to culture, how we were raised. And I like the idea that she is going to be, a little bit separate from her heritage. So you'll notice that in our thing we have some universal cultures. Anyone can do this, or these cultures, and then we have exclusive cultures. And at first I wasn't going to do exclusive cultures. there's always that chance that someone could be raised in a completely incompatible culture. However, there are certain cultures where it would be very, very against the grain in a very weird way. For instance, if you live in a culture of rock people that don't need food, for instance, but you are very much a being that needs food, it may be very, very odd that you would have been able to continue being alive, for instance. Obviously, exclusions apply, exceptions apply, but for the most part, I did think that it was wise to be a little bit separate. So I like the idea of Magdra being actually raised in a mountain dwarf culture. I like to imagine she kind of towered over most of her kind of compatriots. But she learned a great deal about dwarven resilience. So we're going to go ahead and say that her culture was that of, let's see, mountain dwarf, which is a really cool, a little schism of sorts, which I think is really cool. So what we're going to do, we're going to go under here and see Dwarven weapon training. So we are proficient in, let's see, we are proficient in battle axes, hand axes, light hammers, and war hammers. So I am going to put axes and hammers and light and medium armor. You're more than welcome to go a little bit more detail. I will do my best to remember that. But some people may want a full list. That is fine too. You can absolutely put stuff like that under combat abilities or what have you. Let's see. Heart of the Forge, resistance to fire damage, and a proficiency in engineering. So I'm going to go ahead and put this little bubble. This little bubble under engineering is showing that I'm proficient. I'll talk about proficiency a little bit later in the video, but for now, if you want under proficiency bonus, go ahead and put 2. That number will raise as you level up, but the idea essentially for proficiency is if you are proficient in things, you get to add that number. It's a really nice system. So if you're good at stuff, you add a base value to whatever it is you're doing relating to that. So we also have resistance to fire damage. So I'm going to go under here and put resistant to radiant and fire, because if you recall, our orc is also resistant to radiant damage. So we've already got some really cool resistances here. Resistance basically cuts those damage sources in half. Mountain-born, acclimated to high and low altitudes, including elevations above 20,000 or depths below 20,000 feet. I am also naturally adapted to cold climates. So that's going to be interesting. You know, if I am talking with the narrator and we are climbing mountains or in the frigid peaks of a relatively large mountain, I can say, hey, you know, this doesn't affect me as much. Does that give me an advantage during exploring this? And that's a really cool thing. So I'm going to put mountain born, acclimated to cold climate, plus and minus 20,000 feet. And finally, stone cunning. Whenever I make a history check related to the origin of stonework, I am considered proficient in history and gain expertise. So that's nice. So if I am trying to figure out when a temple was made, for instance, I could look at the stonework and see what I can learn, which is cool. I'm going to put checks about stonework, gives proficiency in history checks, plus a die of expertise, which is basically I roll an additional die and add that to the result. Yet another thing that's really nice in the new system. And finally, languages. I can speak, read, write, and sign Common, Dwarvish, and one other language. So I'm going to put Common, Dwarfish, and I think it would be cool to be Orcish. So I think, it's a little bit cliche, but I like the idea that maybe Magdra originally had as a small child, she was part of an Orcish tribe, but unfortunately, they were wiped out or something, and she was found by a dwarven caravan. I like that idea. So she knew a little bit of Orcish, she knew conversational Orcish, and then was basically adopted into a dwarvish culture. So now that we've got culture out of the way, I like to go on to ability scores. And the reason I like doing this at this point is it allows us to put a bunch of numbers in that we're going to modify later, as opposed to keeping track of a bunch of modifiers and then trying to key all of this in. So your ability scores, and you'll see them on here, your ability scores are essentially the numbers that relate to your overall physical and mental makeup. So, for instance, higher numbers are better. The average for most standard non-adventuring people is within the 7 to 10 range. So most people might be considered like a 10 is the average human lifting strength score, stuff like that. So keep that in mind. I've given a standard array. I am requiring the use of this standard array because, as opposed to the original standard arrays and rolling and whatnot, I like this delineation of numbers, which was rolled by a couple of my play testers, because it provides a very nice dichotomy of two things that are relatively great, two things that are okay, one thing that is a little bit less than okay, and then one thing that is a definitive weakness. And I like that because I think that giving your character a area that they are definitely not skilled at, something that they may even bow out of trying, gives them more of a personality. And so what I'm going to do, I've already talked about her being strong. So I like the idea of, she is strong, but I think she is not just strong. I think she learned a lot of, her personality. I think she developed a very strong charisma. So I'm going to say that she has her highest stat is charisma, followed by strength. And then up next, I think she would be relatively hardy, probably a little bit wise. So, we'll give her a 10 there. I will say I don't think she's very smart. I think she was a laborer. She's less smart than average, not in a, negative sort of way, but she never really went to school. She just she was an engineering person by trade, not by aptitude. Working with the dwarven craftsmen, and they say, hey, we need to build this cog. You're gonna hammer this out, and with enough practice, you kind of got it. Let's see, and then dexterity will give a 9. I don't think, she's not undexterous, but it's not her major situation. And so we're going to leave these like this for now as we go through her background. And I think that for background, I think it would be interesting to kind of lean into that. Like, she was a rabble rousing worker. Like, she stood there. Ooh, I think miner might be great. Like, she was a miner that, she worked hard. She always was there to lend a hand. She was very charismatic in the mines. I like that. So this is what she did before becoming an adventurer. So this is what kind of molds a little bit of who she is, her skills, her strengths, her weaknesses. So we're going to go ahead and do an ability score increase, +1 to strength, and then +1 to another ability score. So I'd like to imagine that she definitely would have increased her strength and constitution in the mines. A lot of coal, a lot of minerals. She had backbreaking labor. She got stronger, more muscular, and she got a little bit more hardy. So I like that. Skill proficiencies, engineering, and either nature or perception. I'd say that she probably didn't see a lot of nature out there, so she was probably perceptive. She was perceptive of, oh, is there a cave in, coming? I like that as a system. Language proficiencies under common, which I think is really cool. She started speaking kind of the less couth languages. I like to think of common is like how I've been talking right now, where I'm very formal, or not very formal, but like casually formal, maybe a little bit informal. Undercommon is like very informal, like, like the quintessential use of slang that most people wouldn't understand unless they were part of the culture that had that slang. I did not forget tool proficiencies, either smith's tools or any one artisan tool. I do like the idea that she is proficient in smith's tools. Like, she has probably had to hammer back in her hammers and picks. I think that's a really cool setup. So, weapon proficiencies, maul, warhammer, and warpick. So I'll go ahead and put maul and warpick, and there we go. Let's see. Feature, power through. When you fail a saving throw to resist fatigue, you can use this trait to immediately re-roll that save with advantage, possibly turning that failure into a success. Once you do so, you can't do so again until you complete a long rest. And also, when you complete a long rest and recover from a level of fatigue, you can instead recover from 2 levels. So I like that. So, as we go, and I've tried my best, not that it will always work, but I've tried my best, and I'll show you guys now, even though I normally like to truncate. You are somewhat able to copy paste. I couldn't get it to work fully. It's not something that I'm aware of a fix, but if I can get a fix, I will try my best. It sometimes pastes a little weird. However, it's for people who like to, copy and paste, it should theoretically work. And as you can see, as I put more stuff in, it is able to resize that text a little bit. So beyond that, it gives a little adventures and advancement thing. After enough adventures, your hard work is finally recognized and you attain a mine you can call your own. So as at narrator's discretion, eventually you will be known to be both a miner and an adventurer. And I like the idea that eventually she'll start her own mine, and maybe when she retires, she becomes a lead miner. I like that. It also has here connection and memento. This is something that may not come up a ton in these sessions for reasons that I will get to a little bit later in the in my videos on this campaign. But I like the idea of everyone having a connection and a memento. Your connection is someone or some group or something that connects you to your adventure and to the world. So I'm going to put my connection, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to roll on my little dice app here, just so I can provide a little bit of randomness here. I like rolling. Rolling is fun. You obviously don't have to do this, but rolling is fun. So I rolled a 2. The charming mining guild secretary who always shares fun stories. So I like that. So I'm just gonna put exactly that. It's again, to me it's just a little bit of a interesting little footnote, and I can use that when I craft my backstory later. Maybe, who knows, maybe the guild secretary was the person who clued me in on an adventuring guild that was coming by, or an adventuring party that was coming by, and I caught the adventuring bug from them. And then as far as my memento goes, we'll do another D10 roll and see what we get. And for that, we got a 6. So let's see. A lantern lit by a continual flame. So I like that. I think I will do a hooded lantern lit by a continual flame. I like that. And to me, I think I would kind of use that as like the, as long as this flame does not go out, I will maintain a positive attitude. I kind of like that. So lit by a continual flame. And I think that's just a really cool additional thing. So at this point, we get into the meat and potatoes. We are almost through, actually, almost everything we need to fully create a class, or a character. And if you notice, we don't actually have a ton filled in here. The reason being, for the most part, a lot of this stuff, it's going to be very technical. Once we get to the very end, I will run through all of the stuff that we haven't done yet, and we will go ahead and get it done. But a lot of this sheet is big because it will be it's a thing that grows with you. We'll put it like that. So what we'll do real quick, and if you notice, these little things right here are cloned, so you don't have to fill them in more than once. If there's something that is cloned somewhere else on your sheet, I've tried to make it to where you only have to form fill it once. But we're going to go right back up to ability score just real quick, and we're going to go ahead and put in our modifiers. The reason I wanted to do ability scores before background is to make it easier for people who are trying not to write a bunch and then erase a bunch and then rewrite a bunch. But feel free to do ability score after class. I tend to say this is the best order, but the world is your oyster. You can fill this out however you want. But what we're going to do now on each of these 6 abilities, now that they're kind of at their final state, I'm not going to be adding or removing any more from this. I'm going to go ahead and refer to this chart to see what my modifier is going to be. And that's really the only point of this big number, is to let us figure out what we add or subtract to our other rolls. So for instance, if I have a 14 in strength, I get +2 to that. So we're going to have +2 there. Dexterity is a 9, so that's a -1. A 13 is a +1. A 7 is a -2. A 10 is a solid 0. And charisma, or 14, yet again, is +2. So I have a fairly rounded character, more positives than negatives, but the negatives can make a difference. My character isn't going to win any real history checks outside of maybe history of stonework and maybe engineering, which I think is a really character defining moment. So let's move on. Now that we know everything about our character, except for our class, the thing that we are now, let's move on to it. Now, as a brief overview of our classes, and I'll keep this very brief, we have, and this is subject to change and more so additions. I will be adding more as time goes on. But we have the Adept, which is a martial fighter, usually a martial fighter that uses their body. They're kind of like the martial artist type person. Then we have the Bard, which is, uses a little bit of spells and a whole lot of charisma to fight and get through life. The Berserker, which is a fighter that is generally light armored, but, that's, again, subject to change, that can enrage themselves to fight with a furious kind of unstoppable force. Clerics are heavily armored, religious folk that are exceptional at healing and defending the weak. Druids are a natural spellcaster that can transform their shape and commune with the elements to survive and fight. Fighter it's kind of in the name. They're a fighter. They fight with weapons, and they're generally like the general all-around martial swordsman, bowman, someone like that. Heralds are what used to be called paladins in other games, 5th edition. Heralds are the knightly people, and not always good knights. Heralds are fighters that fight under an oath, and that oath isn't just, I'm not going to kill people or what have you. A herald's oath is their source of power. By maintaining their oath, they maintain their connection to their powers, whether mystical or religious or what have you. And if they break that oath, if they go against that oath, it can cause real problems for them. Marshals think of them as the master tacticians. They're the people that have a commanding presence. They want to have control over the battlefield, and they offer control similar to bards, except their presence is what makes people fight better. Rangers are the, naturalist ranger archetype, the Legolas in Dungeon or in Lord of the Rings. Rangers fight with bow and sword and occasionally have beast companions that can fight with them. Rogues are the sneaky people. They break into things. They're infiltrators. They have access to sneak attacks, and they're more of a shady thing. Ranger and rogue are often mixed up, but think of rangers as like the guy that's fighting with the bow, and rogue as hiding with the bow in the shadows. Sorcerers are innate spellcasters. They were born with a spark within them, and as long as they have enough self confidence, they can cast whatever they can set their mind to. Warlocks are charismatic because they have to bargain with a patron for their magical ability. And oftentimes, those patrons will ask of them things that are not necessarily in line with what the warlock wants. Sometimes they are, but oftentimes the warlock may not want to do it. But that's how they keep their power, so it's always a dangerous tightrope. Wizards are the book learning class. They learn spells because they're really studious, which means their repertoire is almost un or all encompassing. They are very rarely matched in their aptitude for magic. But that does come with the drawback that they do have to pay more attention to their spells. So it's a little bit more complicated as a player, but rewarding in its own right. Now, looking at Magdra Steelarm, I'm thinking that she would want to inspire her people as she led them into battle. So I'm going to stick with Marshall. I think Marshall is a really cool class, and I think that would go right up with Magdra here. I think that would be a great decision for her. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the Marshall class. Now, this is kind of an Uggo table right now. I will change it in future versions, but this is kind of, if you're ever in doubt of what you're getting every level, while this isn't going to always tell everything that you get, this will give you an idea of what you're getting as you level up. It'll try and give you your features for your class and when you get features from your archetype, which we'll get to later. So we're going to start with class features, and this is where we start to get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes of all of this miscellaneous stuff. You know, not that hit points and hit die are miscellaneous, but they're the things that don't fit neatly into the narrative. So our hit dice are basically what we can use when we engage in a short rest to recover some of our hit points. So we roll a hit die and expend one to gain that many hit points back. So for Marshall, we start with 1d10 basically. We roll a 10-sided die on a short rest if we wish, and we can regain that many hit points. And you regain all of your hit dice when you take a long rest. But right now, we have one. So we can rest once, regain up to 10 hit points, and then that's really about all that we can get, which is, you know, it can be daunting. Now, our hit points at first level is 10 plus our Constitution modifier. So we have 11 hit points at the start, and I've got my little max right there. But again, feel free to swap those if you'd like. I like to keep this one a little bit bigger so that way I can see where I'm at. So now that we've got that, keep in mind that our hit points at higher levels, what I always tell people is roll for your, every time you level up, roll your hit die. And then if that roll is less than slightly above average, go ahead and give yourself the slightly above average. And the reason I do this is if you get lucky and roll a little bit higher, you know, say 4 hit points is not going to utterly change the landscape of your character, but I don't want you to gain 1 hit point when you level up. That is just not fun. Like, you end up exceedingly weak. So just keep that in mind. Proficiencies, we get a few more. So we get proficiency in, let's see, light armor, medium armor, heavy armor, and shield. So I'm just going to put all armor and shield because as far as I'm aware, um, there is only light, medium, and heavy. As far as I'm aware, again. So that's nice. We can basically use anything. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and make this easier. The axes and hammers, maul, and war pick. I'm just going to put all weapons because simple weapons and martial weapons kind of gives that. I'll actually go ahead and put simple martial weapons because there are some exotic weapons that you may need special proficiency in. Let's see. So at that point, we're going to say, look, tools none. So we don't have any tool proficiencies beyond what we got from our background, which makes sense. We are proficient in wisdom and charisma saving throws. So we're going to go ahead and put that there and that there. So we are a little bit wise, which kind of goes a little bit in disarray compared to what we put in our stats, but I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of playing against type a little bit. Obviously, I would recommend looking at your class if you are completely lost on your character and your abilities. Take a look at class and put your ability scores in accordingly. I'm not going to tell you that you need to have an optimized character, but if you don't have an optimized character, oftentimes you will find that, oh, I'm a bard and I have 0 charisma, which means most of my abilities aren't going to hit or be as effective, which is a little unfortunate. So we also let's do our skills. Choose 2 from athletics, history, insight, intimidation, medicine, perception, and persuasion. I think persuasion would be great to have. And honestly, I kind of like athletics just because I'd like to imagine that she did a lot of running through the mines. Now, we begin the game with 200 gold, which we can spend on our starting weapons, armor, and adventuring gear, which we will get to in the next section. So I will put that down here. And now we're going to get into, again, some people at the start will have more than we have here. If you're a spellcaster, for instance, you will likely have some spell stuff to get to. And I'll just poke over there once we're done here. But let's see. So we have commanding presence. So our commanding presence, which I'll probably actually rewrite on this page right here because commanding presence is going to be a big thing for us. But commanding presence, we have a 10-foot radius right now, which is nice. And essentially we have basically an aura about ourselves that is essentially people feel more capable when they're near us. So your allies can attack at your command. When you take the attack action, you can forego making one attack to allow a friendly creature within range of our commanding presence to make an attack instead. So if I'm not if I'm not really in a position to do well, say I'm too far from the enemy, or my weapon isn't going to deal much damage, but I have, say, my wizard who has a cantrip that has we're fighting a aquatic creature that's standing in water and they have a lightning spell. I can be like, hey, you can do this, and they can expend their reaction to make an attack, which is great. That's a phenomenal thing. So that's really nice. Rallying Surge. Also, at first level, I can use a bonus action to choose an ally within 30 feet of me. And if they can hear or see me, they can regain hit points equal to 1d8 plus my martial level. And then I can't do that until I finish a long rest. But I can basically say, hey, you're not out of this fight yet. That's really cool. I really like that. So I'm really digging this character right now. She's really interesting. Like she's like the motivational speaker of this adventure, which is really cool. I really like that. Let's see. There we go. And for Marshall, at least, that's really all I get at the start. And if you notice, most things, and I'll even show you guys the like most convoluted class in the system so far, but like Wizard, even with spell casting, really all I have at first level, beyond, a lot of explanation on how casting spells work, is Arcane Recovery. Once per day, when I finish a short rest, I can choose expended spell slots to recover. And that's really all I have beyond spellcasting. Same with Warlock. I choose an archetype, and, I think wizards choose an archetype at second level. So, even then, like, I get some pact magic. I pick an archetype for my warlock. At first level, you don't really have too much. It seems overwhelming, but we're almost done, and it's been under an hour. We're abutting an hour, but I would say that, coming from the fact that I am creating this all from scratch, I have not looked through Marshall recently to know what I got. I haven't looked at Orc at all. I didn't look at Minor at all, and I actually didn't look at Mountain Dwarf at all. Those were things that I just kind of like went through pretty quickly. So keep that in mind. I'm trying to make this as quick as possible, but I'm going through and I'm getting through fairly quickly. Obviously, you may want to look more than I am. I kind of am already envisioning a character, but this has all been made and thought of during this video. I didn't know what I was going to make. So once we get all of our class stuff done, which, again, if you notice, fairly easy stuff, we're going to get to our equipment. So equipment-wise, like I said, I start with 200 gold. I have a recommended Explorer kit here. This recommended Explorer kit, I recommend it because it provides everyone with a base thing that almost everyone needs. There are a few heritages that do not need supply in the conventional sense. However, I think it's always nice to have most of these things. You may think, well, why would I need 50 feet of rope? Why do I need a mess tin and tinderbox? Why do I need this and that? However, the reason I like that is because you never know what you will need. And I like the idea of being able to say, ooh, I have 50 feet of rope. I can dangle on this chasm, or I can tie people to my waist, or they can tie a rope to their waist and I can help pull them across a raging river or something. I like that as an idea. So I'm going to go ahead and spend 10 gold, which is a discount, to get this. So I'm going to put bedroll, mess tin, tinder box, tin torches, 50 feet, rope, water skin, and I'm going to wear my traveler's clothes and backpack. So I'm going to put traveler's clothes and backpack. Backpack. And now for supply, I am going to put that in current supply. My maximum supply is, if I recall, and I'm going to look this up on stream or on recording because I always get this wrong, and I should put a note on here. I will maybe put that in the next iteration of the character folio because I am always going to forget that. So supply is, let's see, carrying supply is, let's see. Don't worry, I will edit this out if I need to. Let's see. All right. I will have to look that up and probably edit it out. I believe the maximum you can carry is your strength itself, which is 14 for me. But I'll be honest, I'm not positive on that. So I will check and I will edit in a bit of text if that is incorrect. As far as bulky items, I can carry 2. So I'll put that there while we're here. So, like I said, I've got now 190 gold with which I can buy all that I need. And I've got some recommendations here. What armored proficiencies do I have? What weapon proficiencies do I have? If I use spells, do I need a spellcasting focus, component pouch, any tools that I might want, gaming sets, instruments, any useful items. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look through here and I'm like, you know what? I like the idea that she is definitely, she's not going to have the best equipment. Like, I like that she is definitely more of a, like she'll have some scale mail for 50 gold, which is going to give her a little bit of armor, but she's not, the most heavily armored right now. She can't afford it. So we're going to go down to 140 gold and say that underneath her travel or over top of her traveler's clothes, she has some scale mail made out of steel. And eventually we will have more material types as we go along. So that is going to, and I know I'm bouncing back and forth, but I do like to fill this in as I can. Unarmored, our armor class is going to be 10 plus our dexterity modifier, which is -1, so 9. But armored, we have 14 plus our dexterity, which is 13. So we have an armor class of 13, which isn't great. However, it isn't it's not the end of the world. If we get hit, we get hit, but we have 11 hit points at the start, and that's going to grow fairly quickly. So at this point, let's look at weapons. So I do like the idea of, actually, we're going to give her a medium shield. I like medium shield, and that'll give her +2 to her armor class. So 15, and that's going to be another 20 gold. So down to 120. We're spending our inheritance very quickly, our savings. But, it's, what she needs. So we're doing that. And let's see, that gives us a decent amount of armor class. That gives us a decent amount of money left. Let's look. Now, I think it would be really cool if we actually used that war pick that we're proficient in. Like, I like the idea that she crudely fashioned out of her old pickaxe that like broke into a war pick, something that she could break stone but also use as a weapon. And I think that'll give a really cool look about it. It happens to be fairly inexpensive, and it's one-handed. So that all works out in my favor. So we're going to make it 115. And that means that we've got a war pick. And as you can see here, it gives us some information. So it deals 1d8 piercing damage. And because it is a melee weapon, and I know I keep adding stuff that I'm not explaining. I promise it'll make sense eventually. When we deal damage with a melee weapon, we add our strength modifier. So we add 2. So I could deal between 3 and 10 damage, piercing damage with my war pick. And to see if I hit when I attack, I roll a d20 and add 2 to my roll and my proficiency bonus because I'm proficient in my war pick. So I'm going to add 4. So I'm going to roll d20 and add 4. Now, I've got a lot of spending money. Now, normally, I would say, hey, what should we do with our money? And I really like the idea of having some of the stuff from my backstory. So, for instance, I like, let's see, where's my tools? Tools. So I am proficient in Smith's tools. So let's see if I can find that somewhere. Smith's tools. So 20 gold. And that way, maybe, I can work on repairing my armor when I need to. That would be really cool. So that'll put us down to 95. And I'll put that under here. In fact, I'll kind of put that here just to separate it out a little bit. And that'll actually help, if you notice, if my stuff starts to break, if my armor starts to break, I can use my smith tools, which is really nice, actually. Let's see. So at this point, I'm really getting down to just stuff I would like to have, which is really cool. I like that. If you notice, I'm not worrying too much about how much weight we have. The way I've kind of delineated this is within reason, you can probably carry most of this as long as you've got a backpack. Any like massive amount of items would be considered like a bulky item. And I consider that like things like giant fragile paintings and, bundles of looted swords and stuff like that. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and get a few medicinals. So I like the idea of, if I need to deal with, say, an antitoxin or like a poison, that's something that I might want to buy. I don't want to spend 75 gold on anything. So maybe I'll just wait on that. But adderwort roots, 10 gold pieces, and chewing on them bolsters my body's natural defenses, and I gain an expertise die on constitution saving throws for an hour. I kind of like that. If I feel as though I'm about to enter a place where it's going to really test my hardiness, that might be nice to have. So I'm going to put that here. Adderwort root. Let's see. I think I would also like a. I think a fishing trap would be kind of nice, but maybe instead I would do a. I think I would be the kind of person to have a communal tent, like, something that goes a little bit beyond just my bedroll. So I'm going to spend 15 on that. So that way my adventuring cohorts can actually kind of not have to be stuck out in the middle of the elements. So I like that. So I'll go ahead and get a communal tent. So tent. Let's see. Now, I think, in effort to save a little bit of time, I won't go through anything else here on, what you can buy. But by all means, if it looks nice, I'd recommend, go for it. It's always nice to try and make your character something interesting. You'll never know what you'll use, but it's always fun. So just keep that in mind. Now, we're going to move on to the final part of this, like for getting everything chosen, which is destiny. And the idea is that your destiny is what your character is working towards. And it gives you your ability to generate inspiration, which allows you to re-roll your dice or expend inspiration to get an effect. So I really like this part. I like the idea that maybe Magdra's destiny is, I don't know, maybe, I like the underdog. Like, always was a miner, never got a chance to do anything but just be a grunt worker, wants to rise up. So we're going to do that. So our motivation is defiance. So we like I get the kind of my motivation from, and I'm going to put underdog first so I can remember that. But my source of inspiration, which I've got motivation and source down here, but whatever. Defiance. And the idea is I gain inspiration whenever I critically hit a creature larger than me, roll a natural 20 on a death save, openly defy a powerful being, or succeed after taking a risk with long odds. So, like, when I am, trying my best and I succeed, I get inspired. And I like that. I like that as an option. So, crit a larger creature than me, which my size is medium. Nat 20 on death save. Openly defy powerful figures. succeed when risk is high. So I like that. And my inspiration feature is a nose for trouble. Whenever you or an ally you can see fails an insight check, I can use my reaction to spend my inspiration and learn any information that would have been gained by a successful insight check. So if people are trying to figure out, are these guys trustworthy? I have a nose for trouble, so I can spend my inspiration. Even if we fail, we can get the gist of it. So when myself or ally fails insight check, can spend inspiration to gain insight info anyway. So, and I like that because it's not you can choose to make it successful. It's you get the information, which in some cases might be an interesting narrative thing. Fulfilling my destiny. Succeed at a nearly unattainable and grand task. Complete a supposedly impossible quest. Defeat an insurmountable foe. Succeed at a dire endeavor where failure was all but guaranteed. I like that. So do the impossible, beat the unbeatable, win the unwinnable, etc. And so when I fulfill that destiny, whenever I would make a saving throw, I may spend my inspiration to automatically succeed instead. I like that. May spend inspiration to succeed a saving throw. So I like that. I really like that. If I'm inspired, I can keep going, basically. So at this point, we are basically done. I could spend another hour making the character's backstory. And, who knows? Maybe I will outside of this video and have this as one of our pre-gen characters. One of the characters, if you are nervous about making a character, if you don't want to invest, an hour and 17 minutes and 30 seconds to make a character, then that's fine. You can use this. I will be making a few. I encourage you to try. Making a character is one of the best experiences you can have, and I've tried to make it as painless as possible. But at this point, we do have a few more things that you're going to want to put in. Your initiative is your dexterity modifier. So mine is -1. I'm very rarely going to go first. My combat maneuvers, if I have any, will end up being 8 plus my proficiency plus my strength or dexterity modifier. So 8 plus 2 plus 2. So 12. My exertion points are currently 4. These are basically maneuvers that certain martial archetypes can do that are like, I do this cool thing and it costs me some exertion. I exert myself, but I do a cool thing. This is not really going to be in relation to me, but if I had a spell casting class, I could put it here, and this would be where I calculate all of that. Passive stealth is going to be dexterity, so 9. My modifier, so passive stealth, I believe, is 10 plus your dexterity modifier. My passive insight is going to be 10, and my passive perception is going to be 10. So nothing crazy, but it is what it is. And at this point, looking at everything, I'm not seeing anything that I need to have. Everything that I would have for my character is filled out. So at this point, I am done. I'm at the end of my journey. I have, Magdra steel arm. I can print this and write all over it, or I can just keep using my form fillable PDF reader and editor. But that's it. Yes, it took an hour and a half, but at the end of that hour and a half, I have a fully fledged character that's ready to go. And sure, like this wasn't the most complex character I could make, but it's not simple. She's got a really cool backstory, and I didn't have to try too hard to make it work. I basically picked a heritage from random. I picked a culture from random. I picked some ability scores based on like the idea that was forming in my head, and I molded my backstory around that, and I liked doing it. But anyway, I hope this has made this experience or this task a little bit less daunting. And hopefully, you guys will all enjoy making characters in this system as much as I do. So, I wish you all the best, and hopefully, the campaign will get started in earnest very soon. Until then, please take it easy.